In section 6, rendering 3D views, we're going to be talking about how to light your model. Now that we've talked about how you create the model, how do you light it efficiently so that you can really capture the materials, the overall design. So beyond lighting your model, then we'll be talking about creating the 3D view and honing it in to capture the view that you're after. And then getting into the rendering settings. So before you actually render, what kind of settings can you adjust to really get the view kind of looking the way that you want. In this video, we're going to be talking about lighting. So getting into the different types of lighting that Revit has to offer, and then the importance of fill lights and what options we have for fill lights within Revit, the types of lighting that they give us. And then from there, we'll get into the light properties and type properties that are pretty similar across all different types of lighting, but the important properties that you can adjust and really kind of manipulate to get the lights to behave the way that you want them to. So as we jump into Revit here, opened a model that it's basically a basement bar slash kind of kitchen area, along with a little bit of display off to the side. Now, basically what I've done is I have created this, I've created a bunch of materials for it. So if I hit the realistic mode, it'll go ahead and show you kind of what the materials look like for this scene here. But I also have a bunch of lighting that I've placed in here. And today we're going to kind of get into what types of lighting there are available in Revit, as well as what various things are good for and used for. So we have can lights up here, and all of your lighting is going to come in as a component. So if I hit component, load family, and then look in my US Imperial Library, there is a lighting option here. And under architectural, there's external lights, there's internal lights. Under the internal lights, there are tons of options for you to look at. So there's all sorts of light fixtures that are already in here, but there are also various things that are worth noting aside from the various fixtures. So there's your standard recessed can light here. There's also what is called a studio light. The studio light is essentially just a fixed point that emits light. You will not see the point that is emitting the light, so it is great for filling in where maybe there's too dark of a shadow, or maybe you can't really get the lighting to work just how you want it to, so you can use some studio lights to kind of get the effect that you're after. So in this scene, you'll see that I actually have a bunch of can lights associated with everything up here. But then I also have a bunch of studio lights positioned strategically around this scene. So what I'm using the studio lights for is just to kind of fill in various spots where maybe it's not quite bright enough, the can lights aren't working exactly the way that they should. These give me the opportunity to kind of brighten or darken certain areas. Now, once I've placed a light, what I can do is offset the height up and down so I can move this up and down throughout the scene. Usually you don't want something like a studio light very close to a surface because you're going to get a really bright hot spot on that surface and it's going to look a little odd. I can do all of the same sort of things with a recessed can. Obviously I can't offset it up and down because it is hosted by a ceiling. And I would also point out that most lights are ceiling based. They are not roof based. So if you were to do a vaulted ceiling and just do a roof, you're going to have a hard time finding lights that will actually work for that. If you want to do any sort of can light, you need to have a ceiling to host them. Many different pendants or ceiling fixtures, they all mount to ceilings. So having the actual ceiling of your space be modeled as a ceiling is incredibly important for lighting your scene. So if I click on light here, I have a bunch of options for kind of the typical stuff that you would see for any other component. So we've got our identity data, phasing, and then we've got some electrical specific items here. But if we go into the edit type option, there's a few key things worth pointing out. There is the material option. So this can light is going to emit light, but if I don't apply a material to it, it's going to default to just a dark gray material. And it's going to look like it's off, even though it's emitting light. So you can apply a material within the assets browser in your material editor. There is under glass a light bulb material. So Revit does have that pre-loaded within the actual material families. As we move down, we've also got our electrical information. So for each fixture, you could put in what that is actually going to be. We've got electrical loads. We've got the dimensions of the actual can light. This is a 6-inch diameter can with an 8-inch recess height. You can adjust those and maybe go down to a 4-inch can or a 5-inch can, whatever you're actually looking for. But then the big things as far as render appearance go lie down here under the photometrics option. So we've got our typical identity data that we see kind of all over the place when it comes to walls and components and windows and doors. But then under photometrics, this tells it how it's emitting the light and what that light looks like. So right now, this is just a can light, a direct down can. So it's got a 90-degree angle off of the surface. So what is the spot field angle? What is the beam angle? So when it emits from here, what kind of angle is that light coming out at? But then we also have the light loss factor. So how quickly does the light dissipate as it emits from the can? How quickly does that actually dissipate? And then the initial intensity. So how many watts or lumens do we get coming out of this fixture here? But more important than all of that when it comes to your actual render appearance of your scene is the initial color. Now, a lot of times it's going to default to incandescent. You'll see that this preview image is incredibly orange. Now, that's probably not the look that you're after. So you're going to want to go ahead and change that. Yes, the color of an incandescent is somewhere around that tone, but our eye naturally filters that out and we don't actually see the light looking that color. We see it far closer to sort of a light that's more white. So if we come down here, we can change the color to say like a daylight white. That starts to render your colors a little bit more accurately. So you can go through and change and adjust and test all of these out to get the right color, sort of color temperature that you want to emit there. So once I place my can lights in, to do that, you basically want to go to a level or view that allows you to look at your ceiling. So I could go to level 2 if I have an underlay on. So in level 2, I can see my ceiling here, and you can see where I've placed my various can lights in. And then I have 2 different options of this bar within this model. So I've got option 1, option 2 over here. So I've got 2 different types of cans here. So I've got my downlight recess can, and then I also have a wall washer can in here. Now, personally, I always err on the side of more kind of voltage, more light, brighter, because I can always dim them down when I go to render it. But depending on what you're after, you might go in and adjust whether these are a super high intensity incandescent downlight, or maybe they're a little bit kind of lesser light that is a little soft. Now I'm using all of these studio lights, like I mentioned, as fill lights. These also have the same properties as what the downlights do. We've got the options for initial color, initial intensity, the light loss factor, all of that sort of stuff is an option within here. So once we've got our lighting sort of set up, doing a test render is always a great idea. So do a low quality, just really quick render to see what the scene is actually going to look like, and make sure you don't have any really bright spots or kind of issues where you have a really dark shadow or a weird shadow being cast, because if I don't have my fill light set just right, this light that I have over here might cast a really harsh shadow of this pendant light all across the ceiling over here. And that's not something that's very realistic and not something that I really want to see. So getting your fill lights correct can be really important. So that's a real brief introduction into lighting and making sure that you get the initial color of the light correct in going into the edit type options and changing that, as well as using sort of studio lights as your fill lights, and then going through and loading in the types of lights that you actually want to use. Be that a can light, a wall washer, or maybe you're bringing in an actual fixture itself, like I have these pendants here. So that's a general introduction into lighting.